My name is Laura Mitchell, and for most of my life, I thought I had a good sense of boundaries, discipline, and understanding of what was right and wrong. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by parents who believed in honesty, faith, and family values. Life had not always been easy, but I had built a career, found love, and after years of searching, had married a man I truly believed was the partner I had been waiting for. His name was Daniel Mitchell, a steady, kind, and hardworking man who had already been through a divorce before I met him. Daniel came with a package, though not a bad one, but one that would test me in ways I never expected. He had a son from his previous marriage, Ethan Mitchell, who was 21 when this particular story took place. When I first met Ethan, I was nervous. He was polite but guarded, and I could tell he wasn't sure how to feel about me stepping into his father's life. For him, I was not just Dad's new wife, but also a symbol that his parents' chapter together had truly ended. Over time, though, we built a friendship. We were never mother and son in the traditional sense. He had his own mom, but I tried to be respectful, supportive, and careful not to overstep. Ethan was smart, independent, and a little quiet. He studied architecture at a nearby university and had an internship at a design firm. I admired his focus, though sometimes I saw loneliness in his eyes. He spent weekends with us whenever he could, and gradually, our home began to feel like his second home. Everything seemed fine, until one evening when a small, ordinary request changed everything. It was a Friday night in early summer. Daniel had been invited to a company dinner that I wasn't able to attend because I was hosting a small charity gala the next day. That evening, Ethan was staying over at the house, planning to head out early the next morning for a trip with his friends. I was in my bedroom, standing in front of the mirror, trying on a few dresses for the gala. One of them, a sleek navy blue gown, had a zipper running down the back. The kind of zipper that's easy to zip up, but impossible to unzip without help. I twisted, reached, struggled, but no matter what I did, I couldn't get it undone. Normally, Daniel would help me, but he was already gone for the evening, and I didn't want to ruin the dress by yanking it too hard. That's when I thought of Ethan. He was just in the living room, probably scrolling through his phone. It seemed harmless, just a quick favor. I walked out and called to him. "Ethan, could you give me a hand for a second?" He looked up, a little surprised to see me dressed up. "Sure. What's up?" I turned slightly so he could see the problem. "This zipper is stuck. Would you mind unzipping it for me?" His expression shifted. He froze for a moment, and I realized how awkward the request might have sounded. But after a beat, he nodded. "Yeah, okay." I turned around, and he gently pulled the zipper down. His hands were steady, but I could sense his discomfort. When the dress loosened, I quickly held it at the front to keep it secure. "There," he said softly. "Thank you," I replied, trying to sound casual, but inside, I felt something strange. It wasn't anything physical. It was a sudden awareness. A line. A boundary I hadn't realized existed until that moment. Ethan gave a small, polite smile and stepped back. I noticed he avoided eye contact as he sat back down on the couch. It should have ended there, just an innocent moment. But the truth is, it didn't. That simple act lingered in my mind, and it set into motion a series of emotions I wasn't prepared for. That night, after I finally changed into something more comfortable, I sat in my room reflecting on what had just happened. Why did it feel so strange? Why was I overthinking something so small? The more I thought, the clearer it became. It wasn't about the zipper. It was about the vulnerability of asking my stepson to help me in a way that blurred the lines of personal space. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't intentional, but it was a reminder that boundaries exist for a reason. Ethan was not a child anymore. He was an adult. And as much as I respected him, I realized I needed to be more careful about how I interacted with him. I didn't want to put him in uncomfortable situations or allow room for misinterpretation. Still, I couldn't shake the fact that when his hands had been near my back, I had felt tension. Not attraction, but a fragile awareness that we were both standing in a gray area of family roles. The following morning, over breakfast, Ethan was unusually quiet. He ate his toast, scrolled his phone, and avoided much conversation. I finally asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said quickly, without looking up. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. Instead, I carried on with my day, but the memory of that small incident weighed on me. Days turned into weeks, and though life went back to normal, I started noticing subtle changes. Ethan seemed more distant when he visited. He was polite, but guarded, as if he didn't want to cross any lines. I worried that maybe I had embarrassed him, or worse, made him uncomfortable in a way that he couldn't express. That's when I realized this wasn't just my story. It was his too, and I had a responsibility, as the adult in this dynamic, to acknowledge it. Over the next few weeks, life in our household carried on with its usual rhythm. Daniel worked long hours at his firm. I busied myself with charity projects and household responsibilities, and Ethan came and went between college and his father's home. On the surface, nothing seemed different, but beneath it all, a quiet shift had occurred. Every time Ethan came around, I found myself remembering that night with the dress. It wasn't the act itself, it was the way it had unsettled both of us. I felt embarrassed at how thoughtless my request had been. I hadn't intended to put him in an uncomfortable position, but I could tell he hadn't quite forgotten it either. There were moments when I'd catch him glancing away quickly if I entered the room dressed up for an event. Once, while setting the table for dinner, his hand brushed mine by accident, and he pulled away as though the contact burned him. These little things added up, creating a tension that neither of us addressed out loud. I tried convincing myself that maybe I was overanalyzing, but I knew Ethan well enough by then to recognize when something was bothering him. He wasn't the type to speak openly about emotions, but silence often said more than words. One evening, while Daniel was out on another business trip, Ethan came over after class to grab some of his things before heading to his mother's for the weekend. I was in the kitchen preparing a light dinner, and when he walked in, I greeted him warmly. "Hey, Ethan. Want to stay for a bite before you head out?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. Thanks." We sat at the dining table, plates between us, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I decided I couldn't take the awkwardness any longer. "Ethan," I said gently, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, his fork halfway to his mouth. Yeah." I took a breath. "Have I done something to make you uncomfortable lately?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he set his fork down and leaned back in his chair. "No, it's not that. Well, maybe a little." My stomach sank. "Please tell me. I want to understand."